I'm super excited to introduce my panelists, but I'll actually let you guys introduce yourself. And don't take too much time talking about what you're doing, because I really want to get started, if you can't tell. Luke, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Luke Dicken. I'm Director of Applied AI at Zynga here in town. I've been studying and working around AI now for 20 years. I feel like, having talked to Haseeb for a minute there, that I need to clarify. I'm a technology guy, not like a product-y business guy. So that's the lens that I'm coming at everything with.
Hi, my name is Haseeb Tariq, and I've been in industry for quite some time, but working with e-commerce, entertainment companies out there. Started working at Guess and then moved to Fox. Worked there for some time and then was lucky enough to get an opportunity to work on Disney's acquisition of $71.3 billion. And that was fun. And recently I moved out of Disney, got the severance plan so that I can work on something of my own.
It's a pretty hard act to follow of the 71 billion or whatever that number was, right? But I would say I'm just a humble guy who just heads up growth at IMVU, and as far as like AI and stuff goes, we've been doing a lot around AI and automation to really help us to scale up growth with a lean team. So I can kind of talk from that perspective.
Hi, I'm Simon. I'm the head of user acquisition at Hopper. Hopper is a flights and hotels booking app that relies on big data and like a lot of data science to predict when it's the best time to book your flights and your hotels. And so maybe I'll talk a little bit more about how that works and how we apply that culture to our user acquisition strategy for mobile app campaigns.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a joke that only 50% of the people in this room are going to get, but there was a sketch on Saturday Night Live, Coffee Talk, and I'm going to do kind of the opposite of that, which is we're going to take the title, I think, word by word and talk about it, because Luke pointed out to me, and I think it's really important, practical. So we're talking about practical uses of AI, which I really like, because I think it's an important distinction. So everybody on this panel is applying AI in very tangible ways. I think it's really important when we're attending events like this that we can go back to our desks on Monday and take advantage of some of these things. So Luke, I'd like to start and talk about how you're applying AI and even like what AI means to you. And most importantly, why you consider it to be practical.
Okay, so starting out really non-contentious, right? So from my point of view, and this is something that gets me in trouble with people on a regular basis, I take the view that AI is any time a machine is making a decision that a human would otherwise make. And that can be as dumb as like an if-else, which is obviously very far down at this end of the spectrum. And it can be as sophisticated as like classifying an image. So AI is just when the computer makes a decision, and that's a really broad tent. But it also encapsulates a lot of opportunities to try to get AI to do something really fucking stupid. So when Rebecca says practical, I think there's two ways. There's kind of practical versus like theoretical, and there's practical versus impractical. And there is so much impractical stuff in headlines right now, and that's kind of been the thing that's been driving me crazy lately. For me, I think about like, what can we do today? How can we streamline things? How can we move our human operators, our kind of office mates, our colleagues up the value chain, get them out of drudge work and start to do kind of more kind of high level thinking? That's kind of what I've been doing kind of at Zynga over the last few years, and then starting to think about that in terms of like how that shapes game experiences.
And when we're talking about streamlining processes, I think the other really interesting thing about everybody on this panel is that there's ways in which some of your products, some more than others, the product itself is based on AI. And then, of course, a lot of us, and I think, Lomit, you'll be talking a lot about this as well, are trying to like improve processes and do things that machines actually do better than humans. But if we're talking about the product and maybe the relationship between those two, I think, Simon, the DNA of what you do at Hopper lends itself so well. I'd love to know how that influences how you're using AI.
Yeah, I thought the answer was pretty cool, and like having machines making a decision for you is a cool definition that I would reuse for AI as well. And it's interesting because Hopper is basically using a lot of data and some smart like linear regressions, maybe a little bit better than the if else, but you know, that's the basic. And it's not making the decision for you yet, but it's helping you make the decision of when to buy your flight, which is, as a human, like maybe you see something like this is gonna go up or down. I know that in general, if I buy 90 days in advance, you know, I'm good, but maybe you have like 70% confidence, and we add like an extra 25% of confidence with the data. And I think like something that would be really cool for Hopper, something we've been looking at, is what if you just let us make the decision and you tell us, I want to go to Mexico or to this destination, just buy the flight, you know, when you think it's going to be the best time, and just notify me when my flight is booked or something. So that would be like our next step. So I think like we have a kind of very practical use of it with Hopper. Yeah.
And when we're talking about practical uses of AI, I think it's common to wonder, is that something that big companies are more suited to do? Is it something that only large companies can take advantage of? Especially as we're talking about the ability to make decisions and whether that's better done by humans or machines. I know, Lomit, when we were talking about different sizes of companies taking advantage of AI, I thought you had an interesting perspective.
Yeah, I think I have been like working in marketing automation for some time, and whenever I talk to the team and they use like, oh, okay, should we automate it or not? So I think like I talk about humanistic automation, and humanistic automation is what I wrote about this recently in detail on Forbes. The idea behind is that obviously everything is being automated, but you have to understand as a customer, if you are getting certain kind of message or at a certain time, would you react? And do you think that if I am like as a human, if I'm talking to you, the feeling I'm emotion and everything connected around it, I think the message should convey as much as you can do it while using automation. And so some of the things, like I remember at Guess, we did like some of the campaigns where we trying to understand what time our audience is opening our emails and what kind of mood they are in at that time. And then obviously most of the messages are automated based on which time zone they are in, and then also like what kind of titles we are using for our email messages. Another way to do is that you create, yesterday I was talking to someone over here, they were like, okay, we have our audience in all different countries, different languages, how should we personalize, because everything which we are doing right now using Google Translate, it seems like it's completely computer. Obviously all the language NLP is being done on the Google side, but they have no control over it. So for that reason, I was suggesting them that what you should do is you can, like the onboarding should be super personalized. You understand your customer, you segment them. You can segment it using AI. There are a lot of tools available out there. If not, there are a lot of tools which you're already using. They have some kind of AI built in. And start from there. I think that's the way you I remember like when I was at Guess over there, I used to talk a lot with our director of innovation, and she used to come back to me, it's like, AI is something which is super cool. Can you go figure out if we can do something around AI? And we always discuss like, what is the practical use case in our case? And it was usually like, okay, if someone is using our app, maybe we should add a recommendation engine, or maybe we should add. You can scan whatever you're wearing, and maybe we can recommend based on that. Or if you're talking to our fashion chat stylist, she can understand it better by using NLP or something. So adding those things which are super, like a lot of people when we think about AI, we think about it is something which is far-fetched, it is something which is like super, like you can answer that better, it's like it's all about data, nothing else. But there are a lot of things out there which using AI you can do much better than you're doing right now.
Yeah, and now you've brought up tooling, which is what I do. I spend a lot of my daytime thinking about and applying. And I think that usually there's this question of, are we outsourcing this to tools? And when I'm working with our clients, there's a lot of things that I think it's actually a terrible job to have a human being be responsible for it. It opens yourself up to a lot of risk. So, Lomit, when we're talking about like what part is risk and what can the machines do better than what the humans do, I think that's something that's probably even more relevant to small companies, or more pertinent or more urgent. What is your thinking on the size of the company or what the technology can do better actually than the human beings?
Sure. For me, just sort of answering the first part in terms of the practical use, the way we kind of look at it, because we're still a startup, is there's two ways that we sort of thought about AI and machine learning and automation. How does it really help teams specifically, and then how does it help the product? And so in terms of practical uses from a team perspective, my team's pretty small, and I know your team's pretty small too. And so, but having a small team is no excuse that our CEOs don't expect us to continue to grow and scale the business. And so using that as sort of the, as the business case rationale, being small doesn't mean we shouldn't be thinking about applying AI. The question is, how can we apply AI in a way where we can get the biggest and quickest wins for the business? And so for us, when we looked at those use cases, one was around budgets, in terms of how can we really improve the return on our ad spend. And, primarily we were really dependent on, looking at a lot of AI capabilities that we were spending with different partners. But the reality was that, we were still highly dependent on them. And there's a huge risk. Small businesses, I would say, have a much bigger risk than a business like Zynga, because we don't have multiple streams of revenue. So it could just take one hit and we could be knocked out of the game.
So what's really interesting from my perspective is the extent to which in the games industry, all of the innovation around AI is pretty much coming from the indie space. It's coming from the small companies. Kind of conversely, even though larger companies can take the risk, they're a lot more risk averse. And as a result, those smaller teams are kind of on the kind of the leading adopters of this stuff. And I've been at Zynga for 5 years. 6 months ago, we got the green light to form this applied AI group. I had 4.5 years of eating broccoli and kind of showing them, okay, machine learning can do this for you, incremental.
And the other thing I was going to add, because you're bringing up a really good point, a lot of the reasons why a lot of the independent, and I'll just take gaming companies, end up becoming successful is because the big companies are so slow to move on this, or else they could pretty much knock us out pretty early. The other part to that is obviously risk and reward, right? With a big company, moving into AI, there's a lot more internal politics, primarily around what impact is it going to have on jobs. With us, it's not like we have a lot of people to lay off to start off with. So, but we have the different problem to what you guys probably have, which is trying to hire people because nobody really wants to come and work for a small business. So we are, our desperation is kind of our motivation to really embrace this faster.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about having an agency is that I get to work at the same time with a number of different companies and different verticals and different sizes. And I think it's very easy to understand why some of the small companies are looking enviably at the larger ones for their budgets. But what I love are when the large companies are looking at the small guys, like, why can't we do what they're doing? And I have to imagine that, Simon, that was very much the case with Hopper, especially. I think it's funny when I was talking to you in advance of this panel and asking if this is something that large companies can do well. I didn't have an appreciation for how small Hopper was when you first joined. So I think you can probably speak to how AI has fueled your growth and why it's been so essential to Hopper.
Yeah, so I think like it's important to invest in AI internally if it's part of your core business, if it's part of your product. So like for games, like monetization and like improving that monetization is really important. For Hopper, like the pricing kind of timing is important. But in terms of user acquisition and marketing, I don't think like most companies should focus on building their own AI products. For like mostly you're doing creative automation, a little bit reporting automation, but you essentially rely on the AI built by Facebook and Google in the space. And I like to say marketers today are more like plumbers, where you need to make sure the right data is flowing into their algorithm to optimize. So your revenue data, your attribution data is correct. And then making sure that you get the right data back and you interpret it in the right way. So, and in terms of team size, Hopper, when I joined, was maybe 40 people. Now we're like 400 or 500 people, but the marketing team is still like just 4 people, and we don't think we need to scale that much of the team because you don't. I mean, yeah, I don't understand why the other teams are so big in the first place because I haven't been part of those teams either. But there's a lot you can do now to spend $1 million a month on Facebook and Google without too much, work, right? Because there's a lot of the optimization is done all by the platforms. These universal app campaigns, Facebook is coming out with Facebook like automated app campaigns, and so if your data is flowing correctly and you set the right goals because you understand the bigger business case and the business goals, then you can scale up quickly at a small team size.
I think to add to that, I have a recent example where, like working with big internet companies, I think they don't have the problem of AI in terms of growth. I think the problem is the content. And Google, Facebook, and all other tools, they are super smart to predict which one to show who. Mm-hmm. And the problem recently all the big brands are facing right now, they don't have enough content to multivariate test all those ad campaigns. So I was talking to a guy, he has an agency in LA. They built a content studio in LA, and they're working with all the influencers, bringing in and creating content, like unlimited content. Every day they have like 5 new videos. And then what they're doing is they're giving all the content and just letting Google and Facebook decide based on like 500 different videos, 500 different copies, yeah. 500 different audiences, and then they are beating almost everyone out there in the market, because the only thing missing in when you look at any of the Facebook ad, the content is not good. And so they're pushing videos, and in videos it's so hard for you to do multivariate testing. The only way you can do is create a lot of content, and they're working with influencer in a way which is super smart. And I remember like I worked with at Guess, we did a TikTok campaign like 3 years ago. Guess was the first partner working with TikTok at that time, and the numbers were crazy at that time. And now, like last month, I was looking at some of the dashboards they were sharing, and I was like, "That's crazy! They're doing like billion and billion of views each day," and I was like, "That's mind-boggling." And I think that the main thing is, I think all those tools, TikTok itself, like they're like all those platforms out there, they understand user better than all of us. And if you let them decide by providing different kind of content, I think that will be something which is game-changing.
So I think one thing that's interesting about that is that you've actually got people creating that content. What happens if that's not true? What happens if you have an algorithm that's actually spitting out that content in like a paper doll kind of situation? And then you're not bound by like that. And this is where, from my perspective, like it's real easy to kind of focus in on AI as an optimization strategy. But as a generative strategy, it's actually really interesting as well, because then you can start saying, well, what if it wasn't 500 videos? What if it was like 5 million arbitrary, customized for the individual?
I think Anish is over here in the audience, and he's the one who shared that dashboard with me, so he will be the right person to answer that question. I'm not working directly on the content side, but I think that's a good question, and it is something which we have to look into also, that we're not just throwing out content which is not easy consumable, but it's different because like it's completely based on the audience. Like for example, TikTok, I think the audience is super young, mm-hmm. and for them it's like all the like stuff which we think is completely BS. it's super interesting for them. So I think it also matters like what kind of audience you're targeting, what is the demographics and all that.
So there was one thing I could add to your question, Luke, which is a great question. So one of the things at IMVU that we have going for us is that we get a lot of user-generated content because it's a social network, so people pretty much go create avatars, create virtual worlds. So we get in, just like you talk about influencers on TikTok, Facebook, and all these other social networks, we have a whole bunch of influencers on our platform, and a lot of them like to take that content and put it out on other platforms, whether it's on TikTok or other social networks, and where with AI, we're able to identify, because we don't really know what's going to work or not, but AI really enables us to really, instead of trying to cherry pick and have human opinions figuring it out, we just put the, tens and millions of wearable types of creatives out there and just let the machine kind of figure it out. The great thing with that is that, we never really run into creative burnout because we've always got users generating the content and we just put it into the feed.
Mm-hmm. But that creates a cold start problem for any new initiative in the space, right?
Yeah, and I guess to one sense, like a competitive advantage for us, right? That and then the second part of that is, we take a look at the insights in terms of what is actually, becoming popular, and then we get our own creative teams to try and come up with variations of that to put into the mix.
Kind of like a fake UGC, yeah?
Whatever it takes, right?
It's also crazy to think maybe a little bit further in the future how right now, you want to have maybe 100 different influencers or fake influencers or UGC or whatever. But what if, using the new deep fake technology, you say, okay, I have this Trivago guy is standing and showing a price from your origin to your destination, but now you can have maybe a company comes up and say, so you want a person here, I'm going to test 5,000 different persons that I can generate very quickly, or Facebook could build that, technology. And, each person is going to see, each user on Facebook is going to see a different person talking to them in a different voice, with a different face, from a different
gender,
ethnicity,
color.
different gender. And that's what's kind of fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Or imagine you talk to your Alexa, your Google all day, they could just sample your voice and create all the ads or voiceover in your own voice or in the voice of your mother or in the voice of your ex-girlfriend. And I don't know, you can do some crazy thing with voice cloning and deep fake videos. So I think I could see a world where, I don't know, 5-10 years from now, the majority of the people you'll see in ads don't actually exist. Why would you pay someone or be so limited to just one person when you could have
I'll go further. 3, not 5 or 10.
Yeah, it's really fast. The videos upload a face to any video, for example. We could have an influencer that says fly from Montreal to New York for $99, and now I could just sample her voice, clone her voice to change the origin, the destination, and the price based on my ad. And you could apply some lip syncing, deep fake AI, whatever, so that it looks like it's in sync. And that's doable today. Mm-hmm. We're already using Google text-to-speech API to create dynamic voiceover on our ads. It feels a little robotic and glitchy, but it's very, very close. And in acquisition, it's whatever, I'll try it. If it's good enough, it's good enough, right? And sometimes if it's not perfect, it works even better, right? It's feels weird and people click.
I catch myself when I'm talking about, when I'm recommending some data-driven marketing techniques and segmentation, and I actually reference The Great Hack, which is a documentary I watched on Netflix, and I am concerned as I'm doing so because it has that air of I'm doing it to sell fast food or vitamins or streaming services, so it's okay, but if I'm using it to sway results of an election, it's not okay. But I definitely feel somewhere in that territory of, is this okay? I'll ask you guys, is it okay?
My joke answer to that would be that all of us need to go for confession in a couple of years, right? Once we've got millions in the bank and ask for forgiveness.
That's what we're here. I guess the four of you are here to help us understand if what we're doing is okay with our segmentation or how we should be thinking about this.
I feel like my legal department would not want me answering any questions around this.
So where and how do we draw that line? And will it always be up to us to draw that line? Of course, now we can talk about, is there going to be regulation? I love watching people testify before Congress and how digitally savvy they all are.
So I think in some ways, the games industry is like a bit of a canary in the coal mine for this, right? We've got loot boxes in games. They've been a hot topic for the last couple of months, and I'm not going to have a public opinion about loot boxes because that will go badly for me on some way or other. But we're already in a world where we can modulate the odds of different things coming out of a chest in a game. And the response from the app stores has been that, okay, well, you've got to disclose the drop rates and kind of make sure that those probabilities are available. But there is definitely broader ethical implications, right? Because at the end of the day, we're in a world where we want to leverage and maximize for retention. Well, if you kind of create an AI system that is just out to maximize retention, the best way to maximize retention is to staple a phone to every human's hand. So now we need a robot, then you need to threaten every human. And it's the universal paperclips problem is a kind of theoretical problem in AI where you kind of give it an unbounded problem and suddenly it turns every piece of iron on the universe into a paperclip, because you didn't say just sell a few paperclips, you said maximize paperclip production. And this is a big problem, because at the end of the day, if we maximize for retention or engagement kind of blindly, then we end up in a world where the AI systems might be creating compulsion that we didn't intend and maybe aren't okay with, but aren't able to necessarily see.
I think for retention, you just mentioned about, I think, I can give you some use cases, segmentation is something which is super important to make sure that we're retaining those customers. And how you do it is, I remember when I was at Guess over there, we did something where we were asking gender for whoever was signing up on our app. So rather than asking what's your gender, we start asking who are you buying it for, and then that helped us understand, why are they here in the app? For example, my wife, she buys Guess jeans all the time, but just for me. She never buy anything for her. So for that reason, putting it out there, and I call it something called first-party declare data, where you are asking your customers the right questions at the right time. So location is something which is super important. We ask for location all the time. But if you really provide them, why are you asking that? That is helpful. Then they will come and provide you the data. And then when you're targeting them after, they will understand that, I have, that's more ethical, that if you provide them, be more open and help them understand that you are getting this because you selected that or you asked for that. So a good example is in Fox Sports app, you go and favorite a certain sports or a team, and then you get push notification based on that. So now they understand. They're expecting us to be there when there is a new game out there, there's a score, someone has been added to a team or anything like that. They're looking forward to that. And when they get that, you're adding a utility in their life, you're creating happiness. And that will help retain customers. So at Fox, I was heavily focused on retention. And so we did campaigns where we used some of the data we had, and so the big success was we generated our trial customer who were coming in, signing up for Fox Nation. 85% of them converted into a paying customer. And in subscription business, I think that is never heard of before. So some of those small little things where you are more open, and then you can use that and then put in and create segmentation and prediction around it and provide them personalized communication over time, and that will help retain your customers.
Yeah, no, I really like that topic about how scary that is and how unprepared we are. There's a really cool quote that Tristan Harris, who's building the Center for Human Technology, mentions a lot. Is we have historical brain, from that were formed millions of years ago. We have medieval institutions, and we have godlike technology. And so we're kind of in this very dangerous situation. And one thing we can do about it is change the way our institutions regulate things, because they're outpaced like crazy by the speed that technology is advancing at, right? So we need to not just pass new laws, but rethink how laws are passed in the first place, because it will never work if we create a commission about AI where like it's not really interesting to work for an AI engineer who can get paid like $1 million somewhere. And 2 years later, when they issue their conclusions, like the technology has moved on so fast. So we kind of need to take a step back, I think, and rethink how we do regulation in the first place.
But also, I mean, there is an obligation on us to as practitioners, right? The Jurassic Park quote is like the scientists who decided that they could and didn't stop to think about whether they should. And I think, you know, for me, like personal data is obviously the big kind of watchword. For all the work that we're doing, like we don't want to use personal data. I don't want to customize a game experience based on who you are outside of this game. I want to customize it based on like what you're doing inside of my game. And I think just being mindful of like the obligations we have as stewards of data is super, like, because the regulation and the kind of sea change that you're describing, it's not going to fucking happen. Yeah. Like, look at, the world is going backwards at a very fast pace. Trying to think about what it means to go forwards is.
Yeah, I mean I'd love it if everyone could, you know, think the same way. But the problem is that we're not incentivized to do that, right? And there's the wrong incentives in the business to keep growing at any cost and making money more and more for investors. And so, like, yeah, we can all sign like a charter that says that we're not going to use personal data to improve your business, but it's like a prisoner's dilemma. Then you're like, if my competitors do it and I don't do it, will I die?
Right.
And like, you can make a personal choice, but I think we need both for sure.
We need, yes.
I love that disclosing information, because the app stores are requiring it as though they're the arbiters of.
But I mean, like,
conscience.
this is a very kind of dystopian view, but like, aren't they? Like, these days, isn't it more kind of conducive to business to align with Apple and Google and Facebook than it is to align with the US government? That's going to get me on a list somewhere.
So I think something that's interesting about what we were just discussing in both the guest example as well as what you were talking about of who you are in the game, I wonder how much the questions that we're asking matter about who they are versus the actions that they're taking. And in your example, your wife is shopping for you. So does it matter that she is in fact a woman, or she is a wife, or does it matter that her relationship with guests is all about buying men's clothing? It just I mean I think gender in particular is a very interesting one. It's one of the, if there's three things that they ask from me when I register, gender is usually one of them, and I sort of wonder why. And so I wonder how much you guys are using that kind of information that you're getting from somebody outside versus what you're weighing of the actions that they're taking inside your service.
Yeah, I think all the brands are using a mix of everything. And I understand that it may not be ethical, but at the end, I think if we are, like for me, it's like as a marketer, I think about like if I am using a product and I'm getting random emails and random messages, and I will be more annoyed if I'm getting a personalized, like for example, like last month I got a South Asian TV channel subscription, a mailer, and just like I was surprised, like, oh, that's great, yeah, that like my parents are coming over, they would love to have a couple of Indian channels, so that's a good timing and also the right kind of marketing. So, but they may have found my data somewhere,
right?
And they use it to personalize my experience. So there is obviously the ethical side of it at the same time. But I think we in a society, we are so open, we share everything out there on social media, and then at the same time we expect that like no one can target it based on what we are putting out there. So it's kind of like you have to balance it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think I get to have a more kind of hardline ethical view on this, because at the end of the day, like in a game, you're playing for yourself. And I don't have to make guesses about like your scenario of like, oh, well, you're buying it for somebody else, and I need to infer a whole bunch of stuff. Like, you are who you play you are.
Well, I think it's interesting that the black box machine learning optimization algorithm that Facebook and Google have put in place have kind of removed the need for the marketers to figure out who they want to target, right? So it doesn't really matter. I don't target by age or gender on Facebook. I target by expected ROAS, return on ad spend, right? And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Like, they use this signal, but no one really understands how it's used. It's just like part of this, they issue a score, I guess, per user on who's most likely to buy the specific flight. So they have all the data, but now it's like just jumbled together. But then you have the problem of recreating existing biases or reinforcing existing biases in the society within the algorithm, which is also a bad problem. So the fact that we don't understand how they make this decision is also a big problem. But at least, like, I guess, a couple of years from now, we will think it was crazy that Facebook would let us target by these thousands of interests, and they get called out because someone created like a neo-Nazi Facebook page, and then they just list as an interest that you can target. Now they removed a lot of that stuff. It's broader and broader until like it's going to be zero, and we'll think it was crazy back in the days. But it's still there, right? The data is still there, and now we just don't understand it, or no one decides.
Yeah.
So one thing I was going to add, on this topic to what Simon was saying and Luke, the thing we have to kind of come back to is that, it was humans that created artificial intelligence, right? And even us as humans, we have our own sets of like biases and imperfections, and we need oversight too, right? Or we can go off the rails. And so one of the things that we try to do at IMVU, even though we try to apply a lot of unsupervised learning to try and figure out what the data is trying to tell us, but we do try to get our data science team involved at the end to try and look at in terms of the recommendations that are coming out. Are these like ethically viable? Not only from the standpoint of are we over-indexing against certain demographics, as well as in terms of the creatives that are going to go out. Are these really on brand at the end of the day? Because you can do a lot of things to what Simon's saying to get quick wins, but are you trying to build a business for the short term, or are you trying to build a business for the long term? And so, we do a lot of oversights on the training models too, and just like I need people to do, to do oversights on what we do as a team too, because we want to make sure that there's checks and balances along the way.
Something really interesting happened with job advertising on Facebook. So now there's a bunch of new regulation. If you want to advertise a job offer on Facebook, you can't target by certain like demographics or gender or age, because that's just against the law, right? So Facebook finally removed that ability. But they also built a new tool called the Facebook Ads Library. So you can click on any ad and see like who saw that ad, where they were located, what was their age. So there was like an article that looked at a job ad for a truck driver job. And so obviously the marketer couldn't target the ad towards men or women, but if you looked at what the algorithm did, then we saw that like over 90% of the impressions were on men, not on women. So just recreated that bias. So I think like we need to proactively, eventually as a society, like create rules, or Facebook could do that and say, okay, job ads will be shown like at a 50-50 rate for gender, or they try to remove I don't know, that from their black box algorithm, like try to not use income signals, it's ethnicity, everything that we already kind of drawn the line for in society, in offline world, right?
This is great news for me because I was a philosophy major, so I finally get to tell my parents that my training in ethics, there's a job for it. All these years later, caught up with me. So talking about some of the, is this not working?
I don't think.
I think people have been dreaming of turning my mic off for a long, and everybody, I wondered why I wasn't getting laughs from that philosophy joke. Now it makes sense. So when we're talking about AI, and I think that, Lomit, you made the great point that at the end of the day, this was created by humans. And Luke, that was something that we talked about you posed the question of where the AI ends and the game begins, and where does the AI end and the human begin. And you also shared with me some interesting things that you're doing to remove the human bias. And he's giving me the look of, I'm not sure how much of this I can or can't. You have the bad mic.
It's on now.
I don't know how to use mics, I guess.
I didn't want to say it.
There's a philosophy degree.
No, it was more like, that sounds really smart. I wonder who said that, because that doesn't sound like, I don't remember that conversation, but sure. It was like 2 days ago. It's fine. I mean, ultimately, I saw you sort of, in the questions that you sent out this morning, you said, where does the AI end and the product begin? I kind of reject the premise now, and I don't know if that's what I said a few days ago, but like I always reserve the right to change my mind on stuff. What we're doing at Zynga more than anything is probably not blurring the line between there even being an end and a begin. We are approaching the problem of game development as what does it mean to be AI first in our game development? So for those of you who've been around a while, you may remember Zynga prided itself on being data-driven back in the day. We were among the first kind of games on Facebook to really leverage analytics and do a whole bunch of stuff there. My group was basically set up to say, okay, cool, what's next? Where do we need to be, to Simon's point, where do we need to be 5 years from now? And how do we get there in 3 years? And to me, it's, we're not, data-driven for everybody in this room, for the most part, means we get a whole bunch of kind of stuff stored in the database, somebody writes some SQL, we stare at some graphs, and then a product manager somewhere thinks they're really smart and goes and does something, and they're usually like 50%, 60% of the time, maybe they're right, but product managers are the worst, and they're often wrong. I'm just on an offend everybody kind of role today. My question is, why is there always a human in that loop? Why is data driving a process? Why is data not the process? Why are we not AI first? What does it mean to actually take everything out? And I think Simon's kind of hitting on an interesting thing with kind of this idea that you just say, hey, I want to go to Mexico. You figure it out. Because that's what it should look like, right?
But would you trust the app to do that for you?
Fucking no. So eventually, I mean, it depends, right? From my perspective, a lot of what we're doing is we're moving people from being creators to being curators. So we're actually creating like a whole bunch of kind of content and saying, what do you think? And that's taken us from a world where like a level in a match 3 game would take 4 hours for a junior designer to put together. We've now got neural networks kicking them out, and they can do it in about 20 minutes. Because we can kind of spit out 600 in about 5 of those minutes. And then the 15 is the designer taking a pass through and going, I like this one, I don't like that one. Let's have another closer look at this one, let's tweak that one. We're moving from a world where people are actually doing the grunt work to people kind of supervising the grunt work. And that's really a problem potentially for entry-level positions. But like, humans are not going to be out of work anytime soon because we're just not, the algorithms are not good enough. But to your point, they're not trustworthy because at some point, that algorithm is going to say, hey, I want to make a level that is all blocks and you can't make a single move. And you're going to go, well, that's a dumb idea. Don't do that. And let's move on. So without that kind of ability to take a curation pass, I feel like I'm also a giant control freak. So,
I think what's going to be really interesting is to make people feel and users feel they're in control. Maybe sometimes with like
without them actually being in control, just the illusion of choice.
But yeah, like what if you can set like a boundary of like a maximum price or a minimum, or maybe not a minimum price, but like a maximum price you want for your trip, and then you feel like you had an input into the decision, and then you feel comfortable letting the data make the decision for you.
But would you not want that to be bounded in such a way that like effectively you end up in a world where you need a general intelligence that's effectively an assistant? Because I mean, at the end of the day, price is a thing, but also I don't want to do 2 stops. Also, I don't want to, like, how do you articulate that in a way that like doesn't require really sophisticated intelligence? Because we're not getting that soon.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
well,
I don't know.
I'm here to put boundaries on this conversation. And now that you've insulted 50% of the audience, we've achieved our goal of having a panel that is different than the others out there. And I also want to give you credit for disagreeing with yourself.
I aim to please.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for this panel. We
Thanks.
ran all the way up to the end. So if there's any questions, there'll be a coffee and networking break, I think, after the next conversation. And you can chat with my esteemed panelists there. Thank you guys so much.
Thank
This is a
you
lot of
very
fun.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.